Hey fellow fraud fighters, I'm Jimmy Fong, CCO at SEON, and welcome to the Cat and Mouse podcast. SEON is fortunate to work with businesses such as the likes of Revolut, Nubank and Patreon in the fight against fraud. But with this podcast, we want to provide a comfortable space for people to talk about the daily challenges, topics on the horizon, and ultimately give us all a better insight into the mindset of fraudsters. And with that, on with the show. So a really special occasion. We've really fortunate to get Mike Jones on to the Cat and Mouse podcast. Mike is the host of the Haunted Hacker podcast, has massive experience within government agencies and plenty of experience running kind of red and blue teams and forensics. So really stoked that you joined the show. Thanks, Mike, for coming on.
It's a pleasure being here, and I appreciate the opportunity.
So for the audience, Haunted Hacker podcast is awesome. Do you want to share kind of what you cover in your own show, first of all, to set some scene?
Sure, absolutely. So I try to leave a legacy behind, right? So I've been around the industry since before they actually had ethical hacking as a job. People like me, Chris Roberts, Luke McComey, a ton of others that I can't even list, they're so long. But I want to interview those people and how we started and what we did in the very beginning, so that other generations coming in can look at it and go, oh, that's why we do this. Or, oh, I really want to go this route in cybersecurity. Sort of give them some kind of insight into what's available for them.
That's absolutely amazing. And I know it's really cool because it is long form, so you get to dive really nitty into topics with them as well.
Yeah, it's really strange because we started the podcast and it was just going to be me speaking to the audience. And then I brought guests in that were my friends, and we literally just have a chit chat and we go into topics that we don't even expect to go into. So.
Yeah, amazing. And it's funny, just to set the tone, right? We literally started off with kind of a discussion around stalkers, right? To begin with. So I think you absolutely bring. You probably experienced most stuff that's going on in the cybersec world on the good and bad side. I think from that level. Just going back a bit, what's really cool, back into your own history. So you got started pretty early, right? Kind of classically as a teenager, around 14, 15, into kind of hacking. Do you want to share a little bit about that?
Sure. Actually, it started way earlier. I actually started dealing with computers and electronics at 14 and 15. But when I was about 8 or 9, I would take electronic sets and put electronic sets together. And that was kind of my form of entertainment. I had calculators I would take apart and see if I could get them to do other things that I wanted them to do. And it just kind of progressed from there. I always had like a curious mind. And then in my late teen years, that's when I started diving off into, trying to wreck BBSs and doing things that I probably shouldn't have done.
Yeah, that natural curiosity kind of leads tangentially to some of those topics, I'm sure. And then also, Mike, you were you had your stint in the military as well, right?
Yeah, I did signal intelligence, SIGINT for short, for the U.S. Navy, and I studied RF, radio wave propagation. Everything that had to do with signals, whether it was a weapon system, radar, or even phone communication. That was my job, was to intercept and analyze. And then that transitioned into what my later job was before I got out, which was CTN, which is Network Attack and Defend. I was one of the very first in the Navy to actually be in that cyber warrior rating.
Amazing. How do you think that kind of shapes how you address security now, like from some of those very classical technical disciplines there?
So I've been trying the last year to really raise awareness on RF. RF is one of those forgotten arts that can be very detrimental to any company or network. I've looked at ways to exfiltrate data through RF pretty effectively. And a lot of the current platforms, a lot of the modern platforms do not include any kind of protection for RF unless your company resides within a Faraday cage.
Interesting. I know also with that kind of varied experience and that kind of pre-chat, I guess you had experience within certain hacking groups and, infamous ones, of course, Anonymous, APT28. I guess that's an ongoing thing, right? Given the world we're in, I guess there's always that interaction with a number of those groups.
Right. And it's been some good interaction, talking to and kind of working with current members, but not associated with any of their activities, but just kind of understanding where they're at now. With APT 28, that was kind of I guess, an enforced relationship. I had already been in contact with them, and then the FBI made me a confidential informant for a year. And my primary objective in 2016 for the FBI was funneling information intelligence out of APT 28 into the Department of Justice's hands to see what targets they were honing in on and what activities they were actually performing. And now, I really focus on geopolitics and how geopolitics drives our industry, and a lot of things that people don't necessarily see, the bigger picture and how geopolitics affects everything we do in cyber.
Yeah, that's massive. From a personal nerdy point of view, it's kind of my personal passion is actually the geopolitical kind of interaction, and you're totally right. It definitely flows down into how things like cyber defense is done there. I guess I guess because of that, it's completely international, right? From your point of view, in terms of what you're seeing and experiencing.
Yeah, it's global. So I did my predictions for 2022 in December. I've been doing this for a couple of years for TechStrong TV, and last year I was spot on with the infrastructure attacks. And this year, my prediction was we would see the rise of geopolitic-driven cyber attacks. And January, I mean, right off the bat, we saw Russia hitting Ukraine with ransomware against their government. So, I mean, I've been right on track with the geopolitic line, and unfortunately, for everybody else, it's pretty on spot. And I think we're going to see a lot more geopolitic motivations and activities around that globally.
Interesting. Yeah, it's a sad reality, and to me it's interesting also from a personal level of just how this is now very pervasive in mainstream. It used to be fairly complicated, hard to understand, and isolated. But gosh, it's in all our major. I'm in the UK of London. It's in all our major press and the Guardian, etc. And it's kind of the public is getting increasingly exposed to this as well, and the understanding that this is just a bit the normal now.
Well, it's always been there, but I don't think people were really aware of the situation. I mean, there's been an ongoing cyber war since Russia and Estonia. I mean, that was quite a ways back. But it's been there, it's prevalent, and it's not going anywhere.
And also in some of that chat before, you were mentioning on kind of working with the London forces as well, the police forces as well. I'm curious, kind of what kind of engagement points were you kind of helping out on, without diving into some of those sensitive details, right?
Sure, absolutely. The London Met Police have been fantastic to me since I was over there a couple of years ago and spent years with them. They actually showed up for my first talk at Westminster University, and a detective, Andy Chapman, sat with me and answered questions, and we got to know each other. So they brought me into London Met Police, and I assisted them in the intervention workshops that they do for kids, the kids who have been identified as potential cyber criminals. I was brought in to kind of talk to them and tell them, hey, if you go this route, this is what's going to happen to you, and it's not comfortable. And then also I talked to the parents and try to bridge that gap. This is what your kid is going through, and this is what you need to do in order to understand what's going on and kind of monitor and maintain that situation. And it's been a fantastic experience with them. And then I started speaking for all the different boroughs within London, also all over the country with the NCA. It was just a really great experience for me.
And the key you said there, Mike, was kids, right? You're talking like kind of 10 years old, 11 years old, 12-year-old. These are kids.
Yeah, young kids from 10 or 11 to 18. The youngest one I saw was, I think, 10 years old.
Wow. I'm really fascinated by in that kind of unbelievable kind of thing you're helping with on an intervention workshop. Like, when I think about it, when you're a kid, you just don't understand ramification and these kind of what's the effect, because there isn't that perspective shift. Is that what a lot of the intervention is to help paint out the picture of where this leads and to kind of connect the dots from A to B, so there's at least some understanding, because kids are invulnerable, all young, that's the way I kind of think of it.
Yeah, I mean, kids feel like they're indestructible and they live for the moment. It's an instant gratification type thing.
Yeah.
But I think when they bring somebody in who's been in the news, who's been there, who's done that, there's a little bit of respect there. And so the kids listen. And it kind of spun off from just doing the intervention workshops to me actually being called from different police departments across the UK to help mentor previous offenders. I'm doing some stuff right now for for an individual who's a pretty high profile hack, and just kind of giving them an opportunity to see how I work now and see what I do, and kind of bring them into the fold and show them, hey, look, you could be a speaker, you could be a red teamer, you could have your own podcast. Just things to give them to keep them busy and give them some kind of positive outlook on the future.
Yeah, that's awesome. That makes a lot of sense. And if we zoom to today, I'm always curious with your expertise and kind of what you're seeing nowadays. Kind of what would you consider are some of the larger kind of security issues that we as a kind of either merchant or bank need to consider and to think a bit deeper on how to defend against?
Well, I think the biggest problem we have today, and I've been focusing on this for the last year, during the pandemic, the whole working from home situation and the mixed environment within that work operational type situation. Employers are putting employees at home in their home network, and they're assuming the risk of that home network. So you're looking at, Twitter, you're looking at Discord, you're looking at PlayStation, mobile devices. And that's a risk. I mean, that's a risk on privacy. We've seen VPNs attacked. We've seen VPNs infiltrated by attackers. It's another environment we're in today. And I think that we've kind of pushed ourselves into the future, but we weren't ready for that advancement, I don't think, quite yet.
There was a kind of a real sub point of that around kind of even very relatable cracks around getting around kind of Face ID checks, etc. Is that something you've seen as well? From
Yeah, I've actually seen as people go as far as creating masks, to get past that authentication. But I've been working on an attack lately that I can't go into the details of it, but just put it this way: two-factor authentication on mobile devices is done. There's no way that we can rely on that anymore.
It makes total sense. So even in the sense that a lot of these are based on the likeness, right? But I never kind of thought of it as crazily simple as, of course, then you just have a mask and you cut out the eyes and you pop it on and that's it. That's it's super lo-fi kind of a workaround there.
Exactly.
And you're right, like pandemic has forced all of this as well. So that reliance on all these kind of what were considered like the strong ways to do stuff is only temporal. That's one of the things like we as a startup continually notice is, fraud is to an extent is that celebration of human ingenuity, right? And as long as we've got brains on us, those adversaries, they're being creative. There's they work around, they'll go under, over, aside. So I guess you live and breathe that, right? Especially starting on the kind of the kind of hacking side.
Absolutely, and looking at the way we do business, right? So the little thing we carry in our back pocket, most of us, the cell phone, has more power than the first rocket that went to the moon. So you take that computing power and you look at how we authenticate into different apps, and that's what I focused on for the past, I guess, 2 years was, how can I get past this two-factor authentication, this multi-factor, get past Duo, get past Authenticator, all those applications. And I was finally able to do it earlier this year. And so that's the attack that I'm talking about. I'm able to get all of those codes without even having to touch a device, which is super dangerous. And then looking at the fraud side of it, I spent years back when online payday loans came out, and that was one of my first offenses, I guess, was conning those online payday loans and scraping tons of money out of them. And then you look at people like Tony Sales, who made a career out of frauding people. It's a business, it's an economy, it's a market, it's a business.
Yeah, 100%. And that's really topical on the payday loan side. So, like you said, it's been around for a long time as well. But with the resurgence of kind of fintech and the buy now pay later industry within fintech, gosh, that's a real risk, especially because like look how much funding has gone into that direction in the last 36 months, and every market has like a extremely well funded 2 or 3 kind of fast going kind of buy now pay later. But I guess they're very conscious of kind of from a fraudster's point of view, what exploits are happening. What are some of those kind of tactics that you might have considered then when you were scraping, like you said, some of that information and able to get around those payday loan kind of companies? And I'm curious to that.
Well, I would actually go out and build like an LLC or a fake company, set up my own Trixbox or Asterisk IVR, so it appears to be a legit company with extensions. And I would go and apply for these loans, and I would go through the process and pocket the cash, move on to the next one. But now what we're seeing is people playing on different, high points. And during the pandemic, a lot of people were using Amazon. And how many people have gotten that phone call from, a scammer saying, "Oh, someone just bought an iPhone on your Amazon account. If this was not you, please call me at this number." And then you call and they try to scam you out of your Amazon credentials. So they're playing on people's fears. They're playing on people's dependability of, being able to shop and bring stuff into the home instead of going outside the home. Back when we saw people going outside the home, we saw a huge number of credit card skimming, and looking at gas stations where they would set those skimmers up. But since we've lost kind of that face-to-face or that physical transaction, they've moved that to the internet.
Yeah, and it's interesting that as sometimes as tech evolves, then it displaces that attention and activity. But goodness me, it's still there. It's just morphed into, like you said, the other area of opportunity. I do remember we had an anonymous fraudster on our show a few months ago, and one of the key takeaways there was not just the fact that it's constant displacement, but actually the way they looked at how they perpetuated fraud was never in the way that the industry, so the fraud fighting industry, kind of classifies it, but instead just looking at as opportunities. And if it's not there, i.e. they had to work a bit too hard, there's a million other kind of opportunities that they can go for. And it was a good way to reframe kind of just, or simplifying, right? Kind of the kind of the way that the mentality works there. It was Alexander Hall, actually. It was Alexander Hall.
Okay. Yeah, it's like I said, it's a business, and this is how some people get by, and this is how they feed their families, through fraud.
Yeah, 100%. So as you know, our show is we try and have it that's very pragmatic for our fraud fighters out there. I would love also your take with kind of just that vast experience, Mike. And back to the original thing you opened up with on what the Haunted Hacker podcast is about as well, around education of the next generation of fraud fighters, so they understand the wider context, the wider kind of psychology of their adversary. Is there from a practical point of view, is there kind of like really good, awesome resources that you always recommend when you enter into this space? Here's how you can up your game in terms of what you should be considering kind of joining, looking at, learning from?
Sure, absolutely. Jimmy, you actually hit the nail right on the head when you said psychology. To really understand how to defend against people like me or other fraudsters, you really have to understand psychology. And I spent years just observing people and just kind of learning from how people interact and behaviors to look for. And I think that's key. Instead of looking at criminals as criminals, maybe look at them as subjects and look at their behavior and learn the psychology and what drove them to do what they did. One of my first talks was at Cambridge University, and it was the psychology of the hacker. What's in the mind of a hacker. And I think if you understand that and you look at the behaviors, motivations, and the end game, I think you can defend yourself. It's just a matter of understanding people.
That's awesome. That's a really good kind of stress on that. Terribly, I can't remember the Netflix show I watched. I think it was called How to Sell Drugs Online, and it's based on the kind of German kind of hacker that kind of set that up. But what was amazing as an insight from that for me, and as I meet ex-hackers, ex-fraudsters a lot, is almost just the happenstance of it, and maybe the lack of. They didn't need to be like a deep-rooted thing they were trying to achieve. It's happenstance, and that's what's amazing is thinking it might be as highly constructed, but it could just be as simple as this is just the sequence of events that led out, and oftentimes it's around curiosity, and it's curiosity with maybe a natural inclination for not tying the ethical side to their actions is kind of like all that's needed, right? It's fascinating from the psychology side as well. And I'm always curious because one observation that we always see is this crime as a service, in terms of making it, you don't even need to code anymore. You can just like a business can consume like a SaaS service easily, right? It's happening in the criminal enterprise world as well.
Yeah, it's happening government level as well. I mean, we saw the first time that what I consider ransomware as a weapon with Russia and Ukraine. I mean, so we're starting to see a lot more collaboration between nation state and ransomware and fraudsters. And I think that's going to continue to happen. But yeah, I mean, that happenstance, literally the way that I found a way to defeat two-factor authentication was by accident. I've been trying it for multiple times, multiple years, and then all of a sudden it just worked. And I thought, this is how it actually works in our world. We get curious and we start taking things apart, and all of a sudden the light goes off. And next thing you know, a security control globally is gone.
Mike, been absolutely fascinating chat. Really appreciate your time. As you know, our show is known as the Cat and Mouse podcast. And for us, we're always curious in the world of, say, professional fraud fighter versus that professional fraudster or hacker. Who do you think represents the cat in that scenario, and who's the mouse according to you?
Well, I think that what we have is the industry and the controls are the mouse, and the fraudsters are the cats, because we have to attack those technologies. But what happens after we defeat it? You get an advancement in that technology and innovation. So we kind of push that innovation. And without hackers, where would we be? We would be stuck back in 1995.
Mike, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks again for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.